are you?
Good, very well, thank you.
Remaining by the fleeting illusion.
Circuit Court of Fairfax County is now in session. John Penny has to resign.
Good morning, Judy. All right. Thank you. Apologize. We had a delayed juror, but now we have all the jury. So we're good to go. All right. Do we have preliminary matters? All right. Sure. Are we ready for the jury then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, your next witness.
Your Honor, we'd like to call Bruce Witkin, and it's by deposition designation.
All right, and who's first?
I think we are. I think we asked the questions first.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's right.
Will counsel please stipulate that in lieu of formally swearing in the witness, the reporter will instead ask the witness to acknowledge that their testimony will be true under the penalties of perjury, that counsel will not object to the admissibility of the transcript based on proceeding this way, and that the witness has verified that he is in fact Bruce Witkin.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Mr. Chu?
So agreed.
And could you please state your name and business address for the record, please?
Bruce Witkin, California, 91607.
And how did you meet Mr. Depp?
He joined the band that I was in Florida.
And did Depp ever become family?
To me? Yeah.
Who was the first person that Depp married?
My sister-in-law, Lori Ann Allison. Yes.
Okay. And was that around the time?
It's right when we moved out here, 1984.
Okay. So how long have you known Mr. Depp? How many years?
It's got to be over 40, maybe from 82 to now.
And would you consider yourself friends with Mr. Depp?
We were until about 4 years ago, yeah.
Okay. And before 4 years ago, were you close friends?
Yeah, I would consider him my best friend, yeah.
Was he like a brother to you before 4 years ago?
I mean, yeah, we were brothers. You would call me a brother, I'd call him a brother, yeah. We had a lot in common.
Is it fair to say that he was like family before 4 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, he was friends with my mom. My mom loved him. I mean, yeah, we were as close as you can get.
And do you agree to tell the truth today, regardless of your close past friendship with Mr. Depp?
I tell the truth either way, yes.
From about 2011 until 2016, how often do you think that how often do you estimate that you would have communicated with Mr. Depp?
A lot. We were working a lot of music together. We did a film together. Well, he did the film. I just helped record some stuff. A lot of time between that era. But him and I spent a lot of time from around 2001 till 2015. You know. Yeah.
Based on your personal observations from 2011 to 2016, did Mr. Depp ever abuse illicit drugs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that abuse is the wrong word, but, you know, I think that, yeah, it was going on. You know, it wasn't like crazy rock and roll house. No, it was just, yeah. But I wouldn't call it abuse.
What word would you use instead of abuse?
Getting high.
What? Oh.
Getting high.
Okay. Getting high on cocaine?
Yeah, once in a while, if I saw it, you know. I mean, that's a handful of times I saw it. I don't think he liked to do it in front of me.
Did you ever observe forgetfulness in Mr. Depp after he'd been drinking or using substances?
Forgetfulness, no. I think that he's got a pretty good memory, but, my personal experience with him, no.
Did Mr. Depp's drugs or alcohol ever impact the band when you were bandmates or its music performances?
We were all young. No, we were kids. We all did bad stuff then.
Are you aware of Mr. Depp achieving any period of sobriety during the years that you've known him?
Yeah.
And when was that?
It's hard for me to, it was right around, we'd have to look it up, when he did Lone Ranger. He seemed really kind of focused and wasn't drinking. I went to visit him, I believe it was New Mexico. Amber was there. Everything was like different. He was proud of it. He wasn't drinking. And I think he was smoking a little weed, but that was it.
And do you remember about what year that was?
Feeling it's 2013, but I'd have to look to see when Lone Ranger was.
Is there a time that you believe that Mr. Depp needed help with substance abuse?
As a friend, yeah.
And do you know who Dr. Kipper is?
Oh, yeah.
And what do you know about Dr. Kipper in relation to Mr. Depp?
I don't have a strong opinion of Dr. Kipper, but I'll be honest as I can. He was a doctor brought on, I believe, to help him get sober. He was a sober doctor. And I believe he had a nurse with Johnny and a nurse with Amber at the time. I thought it was a scam. I thought it was a complete ripoff. But that's just me.
Please bring up Exhibit 3. Okay, does this look like a true and accurate copy of this exchange?
Yeah.
And regarding the lines, I'm real worried about him and this Dr. Kipper. What did you mean by that?
Like I said, I didn't trust this guy.
And were you ever worried about Mr. Depp's health?
Yeah, I would be. I love the guy. I didn't know what he was taking, but they just both seemed like zombies.
And why were you concerned?
Just because I saw how he looked and know what he's going through, and so yeah, I was concerned, but couldn't get back in there to try and help.
Were you nervous for him in relation to drugs and alcohol?
Yes.
So you did have some health concerns or not?
Well, yeah. Like I said, we're not as young as we used to be, and there was a part during that time that he was hitting it pretty hard. You could tell, and I just didn't want anything to happen to him.
And those concerns related to Mr. Depp's health?
Yeah.
And they related to Mr. Depp's drug and alcohol use?
Yes.
Back to Kipper for a moment. Do you know if when Dr. Kipper prescribed drugs, would Mr. Depp also take anything else besides that? For example, would Mr. Depp drink alcohol or use other drugs in addition to prescription drugs from 2011 to 2016?
The answer would be yes. It just seemed odd to me that there was weed and wine and a soberness. Didn't make sense to me.
And has Amber been nice to you since you've met her?
Amber was always very nice to me, yes.
And would you consider Mr. Depp to be a romantic person?
Yeah, I think so.
And why do you say that?
Just by the way I've seen him act,
And have you noticed a certain intensity of Mr. Depp's relationships?
Yes.
And have you ever observed Mr. Depp exhibit any jealousy when he's been in a relationship?
Yes.
And do you remember when?
I go all the way back to my sister-in-law. he can definitely have a jealous streak in him.
Can you remember any specific examples?
When he was younger, he was jealous of Nick Cage or jealous of Adam Ant because my sister-in-law knew them.
And besides that initial time period, did he ever tell you about any jealousy with any other women or any other times?
Yeah. He brought up a few with Vanessa, which were ridiculous. A lot of it was in his head and not in reality. You know what I mean?
And what about with Amber? Did you ever encounter any talk from JD of jealousy with respect to Amber?
Yeah, there were a couple mentions if she was doing a movie with some guy or stuff like that.
In terms of jealousy, would anything make Mr. Depp more bothered or less bothered?
Like I said, it would, if she was on a film or doing something that he couldn't be around it to see what was going on, I think he'd work himself up,
Can we please bring up Exhibit 6? And the very top line, if you can see that, Mr. Witkin.
Right.
Your name is in the participants column, and him or Mr. Depp is in the from column.
Right.
It's dated February 4th, 2014. Did Mr. Depp ever tell you that he had a big fight with Amber at any time?
He would mention when shit was rough, yeah. They were having issues, yeah, he would mention it.
Do you have any personal knowledge of observing Mr. Depp and Mr. Manson together?
Yeah, but you can't blame somebody's drug abuse on somebody else. But yeah, him and Manson would hit it pretty hard as well.
And they would, by hit it hard, they would do...
They would drink and smoke weed. I don't know if I ever saw Manson do blow, but I would assume that he did. He's done everything else.
Okay, but you would see them drink together?
Yeah. I worked with them both on a few things, so.
Let's go to Exhibit 8, please.
Yeah.
We can see that it's the same date. It's February 3rd, 2014. Text exchange between you and Amber. And do you have
I have a vague memory of him hanging at Manson's house for a couple days.
Do you know what kind of professional help, more specifically?
I mean, yeah, to kind of clean up. I mean, he tried to clean up a couple times, and he did. I think he needed that, and he needed therapy. And I recommended that to him. He did it a little bit, but then he stopped. Because from my experience, it's deep-rooted issues that he's dealing with. It has nothing to do with anger. That's my opinion.
Okay. So you were referring to two types of professional help there. One was therapy and one was cleaning up for drugs. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Could we please bring up Exhibit 9? So this is actually a continuation of that same date exchange from February 3rd, 2014. And I'll give you a minute to read it. They're text between you and Amber.
Right.
Do you think that you were going over there out of concern?
I mean, obviously, she was concerned, so I was concerned, and going to Manson's would have been interesting because I don't know if he would have left. But I was trying to get there. I know it looks like I was trying to get through the Manson or find out where they were.
Okay. Can we pull up Exhibit 10, please? Do you remember this exchange as sort of part of a continuation of the last exchange?
Yeah, probably what I was doing is reaching out to the assistants to see where the fuck he was and how he was. Because obviously I didn't get any real answers.
Can I please bring up Exhibit 12? It's April 20th, 2016.
Okay.
How often were you around Mr. Depp at this time in April of 2016?
Probably a bit, depending on if we were rehearsing or recording. And my dates are a little squirrely, but
And do you have any?
Probably a bit.
Do you have any memories of at this time of Mr. Depp getting high or drunk?
I mean, drinking while we were working, yeah. Smoking weed, yeah.
So I think your prior testimony was that you've not observed arguments between Mr. Depp and Amber. Is that correct, or is that wrong?
I've never seen them physically abuse each other. No.
And did you say this was at 3 a.m. when he called?
It was late. I can't exactly, but it was later than I imagined that I'd get a call. So I thought it was, something bad. So yeah, it went down.
So Stephen called at around 3 a.m, and then you went down. And your understanding, you went down after that call.
Yeah.
And what was your understanding of the reason you were called?
Yeah, there was just crazy arguing and stuff going on down there, and for some reason he thought I could help.
What was crazy about it?
Right, I mean, I think what was crazy to me is that's the first time that ever happened. The first time Stephen ever called me for help like that. Usually it's just to come and record or go do this or go do that, but for some reason he wanted me to come.
And when Steve had called you, did he make any references to anything being thrown around?
That I don't remember. It was almost like, shit's going crazy down here, can you come?
Did he say that he wanted you to come urgently?
Yes.
How long did it take you to get there?
My house downtown at 3 a.m, maybe 20 minutes.
Did you ever talk to Amber when you went over that morning?
Not really. It was just a lot of walking around and people going in and out of the bedroom. And, I don't remember if people were crying. I don't remember any of that stuff. It was just like a blur to me. I don't remember if I talked to her. I'm sure I probably said everything's going to be all right. But, by the time I got there, you can tell there was a vibe in the house, but there's nothing I could witness.
What was the vibe in the house?
Yeah, just people, a little bit of an edge, And look, I got called down there at 3 a.m, and there's the mom up. I mean, it was obviously, to me, something went down, but I didn't see anything.
And if we could pull up Exhibit 13, please. And do you recognize the person in this picture?
Yep.
Who is it?
Amber Heard.
This picture is ALH, in case you can't see the base number, 7101. It's dated March 23rd, 2013. Mr. Witkin, you mentioned previously that you had seen bruises on Amber's upper arm.
Yeah, one time, yes.
One time. Does this look like the bruise you saw on Amber's upper arm? Mr. Witkin, what did the bruise that you saw on Amber look like?
I mean, it looked similar to that, but it didn't look like it looked like a grab, not a punch. Like just somebody grabbed her arm.
And do you remember what year or time frame that bruise that you saw was?
I'd have to go through the dates. We were working on a Keith Richards documentary, and Johnny and her showed up to the studio, and I just had noticed it on her arm.
And
I don't know if it's the same date or not.
Did the bruise look like this bruise?
It's in the same vicinity. I don't know if that's the one.
Can you tell me more specifics about that bruise? What did it look like?
Like I said, it just looked like she was grabbed. That's all. That's what it seemed to me. Finger marks.
And did you ever talk to Amber about that, Bruce?
No.
And when did you see Mr. Depp with a fat lip?
Late. I'm thinking it's sometime in either 2015 or 16 during rehearsal.
Could have been can you be more precise of about a month? Do you think it could have been in the spring of 2015?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, we toured spring to summer, so yeah, maybe it's the spring of 15 or 16. I think it was 16. I think. But we did do other rehearsals for other spot gigs, so I could be off by a year.
If we could bring up Exhibit 15, please. If you look at the first text, Mr. Witkin, it's from Mr. Depp. It says, "I'm good, just got a fucked finger."
Right.
And the second text?
That's from Doodles, yeah.
And do you remember what you would have been concerned about?
Just the fact that somehow the finger got cut off, and he's got doctors around him that are supposed to be making him sober, and everything's supposed to be better, and it wasn't.
Did Mr. Depp ever talk to you about that, about sobering up?
A little bit. He just said, AA wasn't his cup of tea. Didn't believe in a higher power.
He didn't believe sobering up was his cup of tea?
No, he just didn't believe in a higher power. If he was going to do it, he'd do it his own way.
Do you remember any specific incidents of anger with Amber?
I mean, he would talk about frustrations or whatever, and we would try and talk through it, but it wasn't as much anger as it was like confusion and sadness and why is this not working, But no, he would never, very rarely would it be a specific reason why.
And did you notice any increase or decrease in Mr. Depp's anger when he was drinking or on drugs?
I didn't notice much of a difference,
Did you ever see Mr. Depp doing drugs with other bandmates?
Yes.
Did you ever see Mr. Depp doing drugs with Joe Perry?
Yes.
And what types of drugs did you see them do?
They were doing cocaine.
And how do you know they were doing cocaine?
Because I was in the room.
And around what time was that?
It was pretty late.
What year?
It had to be 2016 because that's when we were on the road.
Have you ever seen Mr. Depp do cocaine before 2016?
Yes.
And when was that?
Probably 2014 was the first time I saw him do it, because I was quite surprised, because when we were kids, he hated this stuff. But then after that, when I kind of said, "Why are you doing this?" he kind of hid it from me for a long time until, I believe, in 2016.
And do you have any recollection of steps Mr. Depp took in December 2015 to try to assist in decreasing spending?
I don't know all the details about it. There was obviously another lawsuit with that whole thing. But I do know leading up to that time, he needed to slow down on spending. I heard about that.
Did Mr. Depp tell you about that?
Yeah.
What'd he say?
Time. Just something about the business manager and, been spending too much and I need to slow down or do more movies or whatever.
Have you been involved in Mr. Depp's any of Mr. Depp's prior lawsuits?
Yes, I have. I was part of the first one against the management group, and then I was deposed in the lawsuit with his lawyer, Jake Bloom.
Did you testify? Do you remember testifying about drug and alcohol use in that by Mr. Depp in that deposition?
Yes.
And what was that about?
I was at Johnny's house. Things were going good. We were hanging out, talking. And I guess Waldman came in and Johnny introduced me, and I just remember Waldman saying, "Hey, nice to meet you." And Johnny had told Waldman that I was part of Unison Music, which was named in the lawsuit, and if they needed any paperwork from me, that I had all my paperwork and tax returns. And Waldman turned right at me, looked me in the eye, and just said, "You got any shit on the Mandels?" And I said, "No." And that was it. That's the last time I saw him.
And you also testified in the Bloom case. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you testify to Mr. Depp's drug and alcohol use in that testimony?
I believe I did.
How did Mr. Depp respond to your testimony?
Not happy.
Not happy. And what's your relationship with Mr. Depp now? What happened in the last 4 years?
Honestly, I don't know. Somehow I started to feel a distance. End of 2017, we had a gig, and I saw him, but he was really kind of distant and kind of fucked up. And it's like he wrote me this weird text saying I stabbed him in the back and bad-mouthed him. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he wouldn't explain it. And pretty much haven't seen him since 2018. Didn't even get to have the whole bro argument. Just cut off. Can't get through to him. No return text. No nothing. No email. My daughter even got married and he ignored it. So I think there's some people behind the scenes talking shit about me because everybody always tried to position themselves, oh, who's the best friend and who's this, that, and when I was just there to be his friend. And I think there were some lies and bullshit said about me that he actually believed, which is surprising. And I've yet to have the conversation with him to go, "What are you talking about?" I know that he wasn't happy about my testimony, but I wasn't going to lie.
And did you ever try and help Mr. Depp?
Oh, yeah, I tried.
Did you ever try and help him with substance abuse?
I mean, I got him with a therapist, but never tried an intervention or nothing like that. No. We would just talk about it, and he would say, "Oh, you know, I'll be all right, I'll be all right." And I'd say, "Well, you're not all right." And shit would just move on to the next conversation.
Did you observe anyone else trying to help Mr. Depp with substance abuse?
I mean, I know Christy, his sister, was always concerned with his well-being, whether it was substance abuse or not. And everybody, I think, deep down inside was, but like I said, the people on payroll won't really say much. They'll try, but they don't want to lose their job. And I'm not saying they all fall into that category, but it's a strange thing around people like him. Everybody wants something.
And I think today you testified to seeing a bruise, but is it fair to say that you have no knowledge one way or another of violence?
Not personal knowledge, no.
You mentioned before that Mr. Depp has pushed you away in the last 4 years. Is that right?
Yes.
Has Mr. Depp ever admitted being violent to you?
No.
With anyone?
No.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Your next witness.
The next witness are a lady called Tracy Jacobs. She is also by deposition designation and begins with me.
I'm sorry. One more time. Yeah.
Your Honor, we'd like to call Tracy Jacobs. She's also by deposition designation, and it begins with me asking questions.
All right, thank you.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Tracy Renee Jacobs, Los Angeles, California.
And what is your current occupation?
Talent agent.
And how long have you been a talent agent?
34 years.
Ms. Jacobs, when did you first begin representing Mr. Depp?
When I was at another agency at ICM, I think I represented him 30 years. So now, since he's been gone almost 5 years, you can subtract 35 years. And then when I came to UTA, I believe it was 1998, he came with me. And I've been at UTA for, well, now it's been 22 years, minus the last 4. He was with me from the beginning.
During the time that you represented Mr. Depp as his talent agent, please describe the types of jobs and responsibilities you performed for him.
I was his agent, so my job, as all agents are, was to find, procure, and negotiate jobs for him, acting jobs for him initially.
Well, I'm assuming if you were his talent agent that you would know how his career was tracking over that 30 years you were with him, would you not?
He became the biggest star in the world.
And do you take any credit for that?
Yes.
And why? What do you think your contributions were to Mr. Depp becoming the biggest star in the world?
Well, A, that he was extraordinarily talented, and B, that my talent was compatible with his in terms of understanding the kinds of roles and scripts and filmmakers that would make sense for him to work with, and being able to master the two and put them together.
What is your understanding of the reason why Mr. Depp terminated you?
I really don't know. All I know is he terminated essentially everyone in his life, so I was along for the ride, I guess.
Line 20 said, I'm directing your attention to line 20 of Mr. Depp's deposition on November 2020. And why did you leave Tracy Jacobs in October 2016? Go down. And Mr. Depp's answer was, Ms. Jacobs, in the same attempt to corral the thievery and the injustice that was practiced upon me by Mr. Mandel and Mr. Bloom, at a certain point, Tracy Jacobs began to sort of become revealed as, I won't say co-conspirator necessarily, but she was part of that little group. And it seemed in my best interest to walk away from that relationship because her interests were quite different than when we started. I believe she even stated that the reason she kept me for so long was, the quote, was the money. She stated otherwise, she said, I was not an easy client to represent or something to that extent, and so yes, I had to leave the agency. Would you agree with Mr. Depp's characterization of your representation of him?
Oh, I understand it. This is the first time I'm hearing or seeing this in 5 years. No, is the answer.
And why do you not agree with this?
Because it's all untrue.
And then I asked him, after asking if he sued you, and he said no. He did sue Mr. Mandel and Jake Bloom, so I thought it was prudent to ask. Then I asked him, did Tracy Jacobs say why she did not consider you to be an easy client to represent? And she never expressed any of those things to me. These are things that she was able, I guess, she came to the realization that I was not easy to represent after I fired her. Ms. Jacobs, there was conflicts of interest all over the place. She had been represented by Joel Mandel. She was also, to some degree, represented by Jake Bloom. So therefore, there was an obvious, great, huge conflict of interest, which I lived with for a little while and thought, no, it's not a good idea. Now, my question to you is, do you agree with Mr. Depp's characterization that you only expressed that he was a difficult client to work for after he fired you?
Absolutely not.
Do you agree that you had conflicts of interest all over the place in representing Mr. Depp, as he states here?
No.
Do you agree that you had been represented by Joel Mandel?
Nope, never.
Was Mr. Depp a difficult client to represent?
He wasn't initially, and it became far more complicated in the last 10 years of my representing him.
And how did it become far more complicated in the last 10 years you represented him?
His unprofessional behavior.
Anything else?
I think that covers a multitude of things.
And that's going to be my next question. What do you mean by Mr. Depp's unprofessional behavior in the last 10 years of your representation?
Showing up late to set consistently on virtually every movie. I would get yelled at. I never said to him, "You're a difficult client." I never used those words, but I was very honest with him and said, "You've got to stop doing this. This is hurting you." And it did. And yeah.
Did, even with your speaking to Mr. Depp about him consistently showing up late for set, did he correct that behavior during that last 10 years?
No.
And what types of difficulties did that cause for Mr. Depp?
Well, initially, crews loved him because he was always so great with the crew, but crews don't love sitting around for hours and hours and hours waiting for the star of the movie to show up. And it also got around town. I mean, people talk. It's a small community. And it made people reluctant to use him toward the end.
And when you say toward the end, was that toward the end of your representation of Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Do you recall difficulties that Mr. Depp had during Pirates 5?
Yes.
Did you have just one conversation with Sean Bailey, or did you have more than one conversation with Sean Bailey about Mr. Depp and Pirates 5?
More than one, I'm sure. I don't recall.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of the production of Pirates 5 having to suspend for several weeks while Mr. Depp had surgery on his finger?
Yes.
Did you go to Australia at any point during the filming of Pirates 5?
Twice.
Yes. Was there something that caused you to determine that that was the time you should get on a plane and fly to Australia?
Yes.
What do you recall that being?
The complaints about what I stated earlier about the lateness, not showing up to talk to him about it.
When you were talking earlier about there being a change in Mr. Depp's behavior over the last 10 years of your representation and it becoming more unprofessional, was part of the unprofessional behavior his increased use of alcohol and drugs?
Yes.
Was part of the unprofessional behavior that you witnessed increasing over the last 10 years of your representation of Mr. Depp, his increasing anger and tendency towards violence?
No.
Do you know who referred Dr. Kipper to Mr. Depp?
I did.
And why did you refer Dr. Kipper to Mr. Depp?
He has had a lot of experience with high-profile people and really helping them seriously get and stay sober.
Did you observe in your dealings with Mr. Depp as his representative that he romanticized the entire drug culture?
Yes.
I'm asking for your observations based on your dealings with Mr. Depp. Was it your observation that Mr. Depp had fundamental issues with anger?
Actually,
Yeah.
And in your observation of Mr. Depp having fundamental issues with anger, did that worsen over the time of your representation, or was it relatively the same?
Yes. It worsened over time.
Did you observe Mr. Depp lacking patience when he didn't get his needs met?
Yes, but yes.
Do you recall a time while you were representing Mr. Depp that he started having earpieces so people could feed him his lines during filming?
Yes.
Recall that became a regular thing for Mr. Depp, that he needed to use earpieces for lines being fed to him during films.
Yes.
Do you have a recollection of issues associated with London Fields?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at deposition exhibit number 8. Ms. Jacobs, I'll take you to the second page first so you can just read the frame. And there's really just a part there. And then here's where I'm going to direct your attention. This is from Mr. Depp to you on Saturday, August 29, 2015. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Depp, when Mr. Depp would write to you in emails, would he regularly have parts of it all capitals and exclamation marks?
Yes.
Harley's, he says fucking Harley. What is he talking about?
I think he's referring to, I don't know. I think he might be referring to the daughter of a director friend of his, but I'm not sure.
So do you have an understanding of what he's talking about with the Matthew Cullen version?
Matthew Cullen was the director. I don't know about nudity, although clearly that was the case according to his understanding. And I guess he was trying to get me to kill it.
Okay. And then you responded to him, I'm already on it with lawyers, and Marty Singer has spoken to Matthew Cullen twice this AM. He also wants it stopped. We are doing everything to shut this down. Was there another version of London?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to correct myself. He made a typo here, which is why Harley, he means Hanley. They were the producers.
And as you sit here today, can you recall anyone at Disney committing in any way that Johnny Depp would be in Pirate 6?
No.
You testified at the beginning of this deposition that while you represented Mr. Depp, he was, I think, the biggest star in the world. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And what would you say the reputation of Johnny Depp is today?
These lawsuits don't help.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, it's endless, but I don't know because I'm not out there selling him anymore.
Have you ever seen Mr. Depp engage in angry behavior?
Yes.
Now, were you aware that Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit in the United Kingdom against the Sun newspapers and Dan Wooten, the editor, because they called him a wife beater?
Yes.
Have you ever seen Mr. Depp hit a woman?
Judge
No.
Moody?
Have you ever seen Mr. Depp throw anything at a woman?
No.
Have you ever seen Mr. Depp hit a woman?
No.
Other than Amber Heard, do you know of any other woman who ever accused Mr. Depp of physical abuse?
No.
Have you ever seen in person any marks on Amber Heard?
No.
Ms. Jacobs, you testified, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in the last 10 years of your representation of Mr. Depp, there was more unprofessional behavior by Mr. Depp. Is that correct?
Yes.
During that period of time, the last 10 years you represented him, was he ever fired from a movie?
No.
Have you ever seen this document before?
I don't recall this exact document, but I know there were conversations going on.
What were you referring to when you said at the top of this document, Depp Exhibit 5, this is good news?
That we were able to help him out when he was in financial desperation.
When you say help him out, who is him?
Johnny Depp.
And what particularly was good news?
That we were able to secure a loan for him through Bank of America when Ed White couldn't get him any money. And it was very helpful to him.
What was the final deal for Murder on the Orient Express?
$5 million for 4 consecutive weeks, plus a great back end, which he has received significant money on subsequently.
What was Mr. Depp's upfront compensation for Pirates 5?
Yeah, he got paid $25 million with the back end.
Would it be fair to say that you cannot say one way or the other whether Mr. Depp has hit, punched, kicked, headbutted, or choked Amber Heard?
Yes.
Can you say one way or the other whether Mr. Depp has ever hit, punched, kicked, headbutted, or choked anyone else? Yes. Can you say one way or the other? Do you know?
No.
Would it be fair to say that you were continuing to bring in good, solid work for Mr. Depp right up to the time Mr. Depp terminated you?
Correct, yes.
Earlier you said that Mr. Depp's reputation, that he became the greatest actor in the world, right?
That's not what I said, but I said he became the biggest movie star in the world.
Movie star, thank you, forgive me. So, as of the time that you were terminated by Mr. Depp in October 2016, did you still believe that Mr. Depp was the greatest movie star in the world?
No.
Why not?
Because his star had dimmed due to it getting harder to get him jobs, given the reputation that he had acquired due to his lateness and other things.
And what were the other things?
Just, people were talking and the question was out there about his behavior.
And that behavior included?
I think I've described it several times.
Would that behavior include alcohol and drug use?
Yes.
Mr. Chu asked you about City of Lies, and you indicated that you didn't believe it was released. Are you aware that Mr. Depp was accused of punching a local manager in the face during the filming of City of Lies?
I read that. I don't know.
Do you have any understanding of why Mr. Depp needed that loan in January of 2016.
Yes, he had said he had come in and met with us, and he had asked for $20 million.
Did Mr. Depp tell you when he met with you why he needed $20 million?
Not specifically, other than he just needed the money.
Was there any general discussion as to why he needed $20 million in January of 2016?
Not as to why. He just expected us to do it.
So Mr. Depp came in and said, I want you to get $20 million for me?
Actually, it was, I want you to give me $20 million. It was not discussed. The question was not asked as a loan.
And what did you say in response?
I didn't. Jeremy Zimmer and Jim Burkus spoke directly to that point. I was just in the meeting.
And in the meeting, do you recall what Jeremy and Jim said to Mr. Depp when he asked them for $20 million?
Yes, they said we're not in a position to give our clients that kind of money. We're not a bank.
Did Mr. Depp explain why he thought that you should just give him $20 million as opposed to loan?
Yes. He felt that it made a lot of money for us and that we should just do it because of how much money he had made over the duration of his being at UTA.
Have you ever had any other client who's ever made that kind of a demand?
No.
And do you believe the Rolling Stones interview, the article, damaged Mr. Depp's reputation?
Yeah.
Are you aware of any significant role that Mr. Depp has starred in since you were terminated that you did not negotiate and get for him?
No.
Did Mr. Depp get The Invisible Man?
They didn't make it. They made it much lower budget with a woman, as it turns out, for Universal with Blumhouse.
You were asked about whether there was any option contract for Pirate 6. And I just want to make sure I understand your answer. Were you involved in any kind of negotiation with Disney for any kind of option contract for Pirate 6 with Mr. Depp?
Not that I can recall. No.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Your next witness.
Our next witness is Joel Mandel.
Yeah. Again, Ms. Berthoff. Thank you.
Your Honor, our next witness is Joel Mandel. He's also by deposition designation.
Okay.
And we start the questioning.
All right. Thank you.
Could you please state your name and business address?
It's Joel Mandel. That's Mandel. It's 8383 Wilshire Boulevard.
Now, Mr. Mandel, you are here under subpoena. Is that correct? Testifying under subpoena?
Correct.
Okay. Could you please describe a little bit about your educational background and work experience?
I graduated from Brown University in 1980. I graduated from the University of California Berkeley School of Law in 1983. I went to work for a law firm in Century City from 83 to 87 called Waldman, Bouts of Rothman, Keekel, and Silver. And I left in March of 87 to form this company with my brother.
Could you please describe a little bit about your experience in the field of the business management, the types of clients represented, your reputation in Hollywood, business field?
I'll cut to where we are today. You can ask me different questions. I mean, we're a full, what I would describe as a full-service business management firm. which means that we provide a wide array of financial, administrative, advisory kinds of services. We pay bills and we do tax returns, and we assist people with purchases of cars and boats and art and planes, and we help people with outside professionals on estate planning matters, and we work with brokers on house purchases and with contractors on renovations. And so it's a wide range of financial, primarily financial services, but financial and personal services that we provide to our clients.
And what types of clients are those?
Our business is primarily entertainment. So I don't have a percentage. My guess is it's probably something like 80%. But that means people that work in the entertainment business, broadly speaking.
How long have you been a business manager in LA?
Since 1987.
When did you first meet Mr. Depp?
In, I believe, 1999.
So if you could take us to make this run a little more smoothly, start with what you provided in the earlier time, and if it changed over time, just kind of take me through it if that's possible.
Let me do my best job. I would describe things initially as being the way I described our services generally. I mean, the broad range of things that we do for all of our folks, we did for Mr. Depp. What changed was that reasonably early on, so within the first few years, his life and career exploded in size. And so, as I said, our relationship started in 99. I think he did the first Pirates film in 2003. And so, it had already he was on a very successful trajectory. The success of the Pirates films obviously catapulted him to an entirely different level of success. And that was a career thing. It was also a financial thing. And so there was money made from the Pirates movies, and all of a sudden what he was going to now make moving forward was going to be significantly greater. His life changed. And so what did that translate? That translated into a variety of things. And I don't want to mix dates. It's a long stretch of time. But that meant a bigger life. It meant more employees. It meant buying additional real property. It meant buying additional personal property. It meant a bigger life and more expensive life.
Can you please describe for me the day-to-day logistics of communicating with Mr. Depp relating to your services?
Sure. So I'll explain this, but early on, Mr. Depp had made it clear that, just as my initial introduction to him had been through his sister, that his sister was acting in what I would call a gatekeeper-like role, and that she was going to play an instrumental part of his life in interfacing with people like me, like his agents, like his lawyers. And so there was interface on a constant basis with Christie in the role that he sort of placed her in. The conversations and communications were constant and daily. With Mr. Depp, they were when they needed to be. And so we talked often, we met often, but not with the same kinds of frequency, the daily kinds of frequency that I communicated with Christie.
Please describe the challenges presented in serving as the business manager for Mr. Depp.
Look, they've changed over time. And so the challenges early on were exciting challenges of somebody whose life and career were getting, very big very quickly. And that's a professional challenge, but it's a lovely, wonderful professional challenge. That means someone's traveling a lot. They're, again, income and expense have grown dramatically, or there's more staff, there are more real properties, there's more, it exponentially grows the size of the job. But that's what I do for a living. So that's, all changes and challenges, but good changes and good challenges. My sense of the challenge of this representation and my description of the challenge would change probably sometime around 2010. I say that because it was the time after he had shot the film Run Diaries, and he had come back from that picture, and what had always been slightly difficulty in arranging meetings became more difficulty. And what I had always experienced as someone who liked to enjoy his wine at the end of the day became consumption that seemed excessive. And the ability to coordinate and find times when he would meet became more difficult. And it became clear over time that there were issues with alcohol and drugs. And that translated into more erratic behavior, more stressful behavior, more times when it was difficult to engage in the kinds of conversations I needed to do my job. And so it became more of a challenge for a variety of those reasons after 2010. And quite frankly, the other thing that happened, and this is in 13, 14, his meteoric sort of career rise had started to, there were some pictures that were not well received. And for anybody in the business, whether you're an actor, director, you're frequently judged by your last picture, and there were a number of pictures in a row that were not successful. And so there was a combination of events, what felt like professional pressures, what felt like some professional dissatisfactions, what I sensed was likely strains in his relationship with Amber, the use of alcohol and drugs, made my job more challenging.
You indicated that you were having more difficulty arranging meetings. What, if any, role did increased use of alcohol or drugs have on your ability to be able to arrange and engage in meetings with Mr. Depp?
There were stretches of time when it appeared clear to me that the use of alcohol and drugs was a daily event. And so there were obviously various times when I needed to communicate directly with Mr. Depp. And so some of my conversations with the people I've described involved finding good days and good parts of days when he and I could engage in conversations that he and I needed to engage in, where I knew he would be clear-minded and so forth.
Okay. So were there any periods that you can recall between 2010 and the end of your relationship with Mr. Depp that Mr. Depp had any periods of sobriety?
There were certainly stretches of time when he seemed better. There were days and weeks but there were stretches of time when he was better, and I couldn't tell you dates, but there were stretches of time when he was better and more often not.
As the business manager, you would have been responsible for paying Dr. Kipper's expenses. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you recall approximately how much per year Mr. Depp spent on Dr. Kipper and his staff?
I think the fee was around $100,000 a month.
Describe for me what you observed of Mr. Depp engaging in what you would call erratic behavior.
What I mean are a variety of ways in which responses to things seem disproportionate to the things. And so, you know, there were times when he would be upset about something and he would be very, very, very upset about something. Seemingly to me disproportionate to that something. Again, erratic is a funny word. You know, I felt like things were less predictable. I felt like it, you know, I was, I guess, professionally in a place where I never knew day to day what to expect.
You said that Mr. Depp was sometimes his responses seemed to be disproportionate and that he would be very, very upset. What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp expressing anger?
When he was angry at someone, he would let them know. Did that was that sent in my direction? Very rarely, but at times, you know, certainly on a handful of occasions in 2015. But if he was upset at a contractor, he would vent. If he was upset with a security person, he would vent. He would, you know, he seemed to become increasingly less filtered and increasingly you know, the notion of I want to answer you accurately. You know, people moderate their behavior. They may moderate their behavior in public because things are, you know, inappropriate in a particular setting. People may be upset with an employee, but they're constrained in how the employee is chastised. My experience was that Mr. Depp became increasingly less constrained, less concerned with whether he was going to upset someone's feelings, or just increasingly comfortable venting in an aggressive way when he was upset or disappointed about something.
And did that increase over time, beginning, I think you said around 2010?
It began to change in about 2010, and it increased over time, and increased to the point where our relationship began to be impacted in 2015 and was eventually obviously severed in 2016.
When Mr. Depp would express his anger and upset, did he use profanity?
Sure.
Did you observe any increase in Mr. Depp's expressions of anger and upset associated with any increase in financial difficulties or having to discuss financial difficulties?
Yes. His financial circumstances in 2015 had reached a point where I was extremely concerned and was on a very, very regular basis expressing that concern. And it seemed as I increased my level of expressing that concern, there was anger directed in my direction. And so my warnings in 2015 that we were in very dire financial circumstances were not met very favorably.
So did there come a time that you observed as Mr. Depp's business manager that his spending habits became more increased, perhaps excessive, extravagant?
Yes.
And when did you observe that? When did that begin?
Again, in the time frame I've described in that 2010 and on time frame, as I recall, income was very significant. spending was very significant. And the spending levels had grown very, very, very large, and required that level of incredibly high income to be maintained. And when it dropped off, the disconnect became untenable.
And what, if anything, did you say or do to try to assist Mr. Depp in curbing that spending?
Those conversations were constant.
And were Nathan Holmes, Kevin Murphy, and Stephen Duders part of the $300,000 a month full-time staff?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know roughly how much each of them were paid?
It's been a long time. If I had to guess, Kevin Murphy was probably paid about $250,000 a year, and Stephen and Nathan probably about $125,000 a year.
Do you know how much Jerry Judge was being paid by Mr. Depp as a security guard?
We paid Jerry by the day. I think Jerry made something like $10,000 a day.
Did Mr. Depp spend any money on charities?
Some, not very much.
And approximately how much?
No specific recollection.
Less than 50,000?
I don't recall writing large charity checks. It was more his style to show up at an event or sort of lend his name to something rather than write checks.
Mr. Mandel, did Mr. Depp ever acknowledge that he needed to change his spending patterns and improve the situation?
Yes. At various times when we would have these conversations, he would acknowledge that he understood what was being communicated and would make expressions of a commitment to sort of work with me to do what was necessary.
And were there occasions that Mr. Depp would apologize and say he was going to do better?
That happened on occasion, yes.
And what, if any, observations did you make about whether Mr. Depp ultimately did improve and work with you to try to get his spending under control?
That never seemed to happen. And so there would be, at times, expressions of appreciation, expressions of an understanding, expressions of a willingness to do what was necessary. But there never seemed to be any follow-through when the things would be, teed up that had to happen to make those, words real. There was no follow-through.
Now, let's talk about the tax returns for a moment. Did you and TMG file tax returns on Mr. Depp and his company's behalves while you were his business manager?
Yes.
Are you aware that Mr. Depp testified under oath that you did not file his tax returns for 17 years?
I'm aware that you're telling me.
Is it true that you did not file his tax returns or those on behalf of his company for 17 years?
No, that's not true.
Were there times that you were unable to pay some or all of Mr. Depp's taxes on time? What is your understanding of what or his numerous other vices meant?
The use of alcohol and drugs.
Do you know how much Mr. Depp spent on prescription drugs during the time that you were his business manager?
There were periods of time when prescription spending was, from just my experience, very high, thousands of dollars a month, but I can't tell you the time periods.
Do you have a recollection of whether TMG had to pay for property damage at other rental properties or hotel properties that Mr. Depp used because of damage to the property?
Specifics, no, but did we pay damages at various times over the years? Absolutely, yes.
And do you recall that Mr. Depp from time to time did commit property damage in the rentals that he was in or hotels. And you recall that there were times you did have to pay for damage to Mr. Depp's rentals. Is that correct, or hotels?
There were times.
Okay. Now, you had testified a little bit earlier about needing $25 million by the end of the year. Are you aware of whether Mr. Depp was able to sign on for any movies and obtain $25 million by the end of the year without the assistance of a lending entity? So the first time that you as the business manager were unable to pay Mr. Depp's taxes by October 15 was October 15, 2015. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you consider that to be an increasingly difficult and alarming situation that you were trying to resolve into late January 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I showed you earlier exhibit number 8, which was the video clip of Mr. Depp slamming doors and pouring wine, etc., in the kitchen. Do you recall that video?
I recall the video, yes.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of giving Mr. Depp very bad news the morning of February 10, 2016?
I don't recall a specific meeting with a specific date. As I've indicated, there were a variety of meetings in groups and conversations alone and in groups regarding how these very dire financial circumstances were going to be addressed. And as I've indicated, the tone of these conversations became more tense as time went on and these issues were not being addressed.
And is it fair to say in the first half of February of 2016, the conversations that you have just described were taking place?
Probably more specifically, Mr. Depp and I began having conversations that took on a more heated turn in July of 15, when it became clear that he was not willing to sell the property in the south of France. And the tone of those conversations became more heated and more contentious as time went on because the circumstances were more dire.
And would it be fair to say that your perception was that the circumstances continued to become more dire between July 2015 up through the time of your termination in March 2016?
They did.
How did you learn of TMG's termination?
Edward White had a colleague, an employee, a CPA, someone in his office came to our office physically and hand-delivered a letter.
And who was the letter from?
I think they hand-delivered like one letter on the 15th and one on the 16th. So there was a letter signed by Mr. Depp indicating that our services had been terminated. And then there was a letter from Edward White's office, I recall, saying that they were the new people and we should coordinate a transition.
Did you have any familiarity with Edward White as of the time of the termination?
I had not heard of him.
And did Mr. White accept your offers of assistance?
For the most part, no.
Now, approximately how much did Mr. Depp earn during the period of time you represented him?
I recall the amount being reported to be something like $600 million, and believe that amount was probably, close to that.
Did you steal $650 million from Mr. Depp?
No.
Did you steal anything from Mr. Depp?
No.
Mr. Mandel, did TMG or you take any money other than the fees that you were entitled to from Mr. Depp?
No.
Mr. Mandel, were you ever found adjudicated by any court any kind of legal entity, any agency, to have committed malpractice, malfeasance, or embezzlement?
No.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and take our morning recess at this point. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take our morning recess. Do not discuss the case and don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you. Again, court is still in session, if we could. Court is still in session. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and take a recess then until 11:15. Is that working? All right, thank you. Recess.
All right.
Okay, if you want to approach. All right, we ready for the jury then? Okay.
Sit down, just.
All right, be seated. Your next witness.
Your Honor, our next witness is Adam Waldman, and I will start the questioning, and then Mr. Rottenborn split that with me, and we'll be questioning next, and then it will be Mr. Depp's counsel.
All right, thank you.
morning. My name is Elaine Bredehoff, and together with Ben Rottenborn, we represent Amber Laura Hurd. Will you please state your name and address?
Sure, it's Adam Robert Waldman, Washington, D.C.
And what is your current occupation?
Attorney. I'm also involved with a skincare company in a variety of capacities.
How long have you been an attorney?
I think since 1995.
Do you currently represent John C. Depp II, who I will be referring to in this deposition as Mr. Depp or Depp?
I do.
And is this representation an attorney-client representation?
It is.
Does it include any other type of representation of Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question on the grounds of attorney-client privilege and attorney work product. You can't answer that question without disclosing communications between himself and his client, Mr. Depp. As you're aware, Ms. Bredehoff, the court has ruled that Mr. Depp has not waived attorney-client privilege and will not be waiving attorney-client privilege. So you're aware of that.
So, Mr. Chu, I'm not sure that you heard my question. I was actually asking him if he had any other type of representation relationship with Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client.
I think he can answer that yes or no, but I would instruct the witness on behalf of Johnny Depp not to disclose any communications you've had with your client.
No.
So just so we're clear, since we had a little bit of record back and forth, the only way in which you represent Mr. Depp is as an attorney-client representation. Is that correct? I'm sorry, Mr. Waldman?
I believe that's true.
Okay. And you are here today providing this deposition under a subpoena and then subsequent notice, correct?
Yes.
And when did you first become Mr. Depp's counsel?
I think that it was around October 2016.
And what is your role in this case as counsel for Mr. Depp?
Objection, and I would instruct the witness not to answer that question.
Okay, I'll follow the instruction.
When did you first meet Mr. Depp as opposed to first start representing him?
I first met him in October of 2016.
How is it that you came to meet Mr. Depp?
The general counsel that I referenced a moment ago asked me to go and have a meeting with him, with Mr. Depp, and to talk about a financial problem that he was having.
Did you enter into a written representation agreement with Mr. Depp when you began your representation?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. That calls for attorney-client privilege.
Okay, I follow the instruction.
Have you entered into more than one representation agreement with Mr. Depp during the course of your representation?
Same instruction not to answer. You can't answer that without disclosing attorney-client communications and attorney work product.
Mr. Waldman, when did you consider your attorney-client relationship with Mr. Depp to have begun?
I believe it began the night I met him, actually.
Sometime in October 2016?
Yes, ma'am.
Has the attorney-client relationship between you and Mr. Depp been severed at any point between October 2016 and the present?
Would instruct the witness not to answer that question on the grounds that you can't answer that question without disclosing attorney-client communications.
Okay, I accept the instruction.
As Mr. Depp's attorney, you have provided him with advice. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And you have charged Mr. Depp for your advice, correct?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. You can't answer that without disclosing attorney-client communications. and the fee arrangement in any event is irrelevant. But I'm instructing him not to answer on the grounds of privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, when you provide legal services in an attorney-client relationship, your understanding of that is that you provide advice and your client in turn compensates you in some manner. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, as a general matter, that's how I understand an attorney-client relationship, yes.
And has Mr. Depp paid you advice?
I would instruct, I do instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege. You can't answer that question without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
Well, let's go general again and see if maybe we can work at it from that perspective. So in your relationship with your clients, you provide advice and it's up to the client to determine whether to follow that advice. Would that be fair to say?
As a general matter, I do agree with that statement, yes.
All right. And by the same token, it would be up to the client to determine whether to reject your advice in whole or part, correct?
You're still speaking in general.
Correct.
In general, yes.
Okay. Now, did your relationship with Mr. Depp, and I'm talking about your attorney-client relationship, deviate from those general principles that in some way Mr. Depp is not permitted to follow or reject your advice?
Would instruct the witness not to answer the question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Now, Mr. Depp has the right to terminate your representation at any time. Is that correct?
But yes, I think it's true.
Okay. I
Mr.
think
Depp
we need to let...
would be free to terminate at any time.
My apologies, Mr. Waldman. I didn't realize you were still talking. Did you finish?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Now, has Mr. Depp terminated your representation of him at any time between October 2016 and the present?
That's the same question that I instructed Mr. Waldman not to answer before, just stated in a slightly different way, so I would instruct the witness not to answer that question.
I accept the instruction.
Now, and Mr. Depp, as the client in your relationship, is in the position to make the final decision regardless of your advice. Would you agree?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. I don't know that I know he can't answer that question without disclosing communications with Mr. Depp. So I instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, if you were advising a client in an attorney-client relationship and you were in settlement negotiations, would it be you or the client who has the ultimate decision-making ability?
But to speculate about the question, yes, generally the client would be responsible for deciding, the ultimate outcome of a settlement. Yes.
Now, you met Mr. Depp after he and Amber Heard had split up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you met Mr. Depp after he and Amber Heard had reached a settlement in their divorce. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
So you have no personal knowledge of anything that went on during their marriage. Is that fair to say?
Well, it depends what you mean by personal knowledge. I wasn't there, if that's what you mean. Correct.
You never witnessed any interaction between Mr. Depp and Amber Heard prior to October 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you have no personal knowledge of any conduct by either of them against the other prior to October 2016. Is that correct?
Again, if you're asking me, do I have any knowledge of their conduct? I think I have knowledge of their conduct. I think maybe you're asking me, did I witness conduct?
I'm asking personal knowledge, which would mean you would have had to have witnessed it.
If you're asking whether I've witnessed it, the answer is no.
Now, your initial knowledge of the relationship between Mr. Depp
and Ms. Heard was based on your interviews with Mr. Depp. Would that be fair to say?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because he can't even answer yes or no without disclosing the substance of communications with his client, Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
Once you came into Mr. Depp's life and became his counsel, Mr. Depp filed with your assistance a number of lawsuits. Would you agree?
Yes.
Did Mr. Depp terminate Tracy Jacobs as his agent before or after you became Mr. Depp's counsel?
Mr. Waldman, I would instruct you not to answer that question if doing so would require you to disclose any communications you had with Mr. Depp.
It would.
How long had Tracy Jacobs been Mr. Depp's agent at the time Mr. Depp terminated Tracy Jacobs?
And again, Adam, same instruction to the extent that that answering the question requires you to disclose communications that you had with Mr. Depp. I would instruct you not to answer the question.
It would.
Was it Mr. Depp's decision to terminate Tracy Jacobs?
Again, I would instruct you not to answer that question because that could only have come from Mr. Depp in a communication with you.
I accept the instruction.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit against Joel Mandel, Mr. Depp's former business manager, correct?
That's correct.
And you represented Mr. Depp in that lawsuit against Joel Mandel and his company, did you not?
I did.
But it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Mr. Mandel and his company. Would you agree?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because it would require disclosure of communications between Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman as to who was advising who as to filing the case against TMG and the Mandel brothers. So I would instruct you not to answer that.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp have the ultimate decision-making ability with respect to the lawsuit against Mr. Mandel and his company?
And again, I would instruct you not to answer to the extent it requires you to disclose attorney-client communication.
It would.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit against Jake Bloom, Mr. Depp's former attorney, correct?
That's correct.
And you represented Mr. Depp in that lawsuit against Jake Bloom and his law firm, did you not?
I did.
But it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Mr. Bloom and his law firm. Is that correct?
Again, I would instruct the witness not to answer to the extent it requires him to disclose attorney-client communications.
It would.
And Mr. Depp, though, was the ultimate decision maker in connection with any decisions made in the litigation against Mr. Bloom and his law firm. Would you agree?
Same instruction not to answer. It's basically the same question, gussied up a bit. So same instruction not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit against the Sun newspaper and its editor-in-chief, Dan Wooten, correct?
Correct.
And for purposes of this deposition, I may refer to the lawsuit against the Sun and its editor, Dan Wooten, as the UK lawsuit or the UK litigation. Will you understand those references to mean this?
I will.
What was your role in the UK litigation?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because it necessarily requires him or would require him to disclose his communications with his client, Johnny Depp.
It would.
You represented Mr. Depp throughout the UK litigation, correct?
Again, I would.
And Mr. Depp alleged in the UK litigation that the Sun and Dan Wooten had committed libel by accusing Mr. Depp of being a, quote, wife beater, end of quote, and committing domestic violence against Amber Heard, correct?
That's true.
It was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to bring the UK lawsuit against the Sun and Dan Wooten, correct?
And again, I would instruct the witness not to answer I would instruct him not to answer because it perforce would require him to disclose attorney-client communications as to the thought process that went into filing that particular lawsuit.
I accept the instruction.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed suit against Amber Heard, his former wife, correct?
That's correct.
And you represented Mr. Depp in the lawsuit against Amber Heard from March 1, 2019 up until October of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Amber Heard. Is that correct?
Would instruct the witness not to answer that question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
And Mr. Depp is alleging in this lawsuit that Amber Heard defamed him by suggesting that he had committed domestic abuse against her, correct?
Yes.
As part of your representation of Mr. Depp, you contacted potential witnesses. Is that correct?
Again, I would, that is attorney work product, and that is protected in Virginia. So I would object on that basis, but you can answer that question yes or no.
Yes.
You also spoke with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf, did you not?
And I would instruct the witness not to answer to the extent that it requires disclosure of any communications between yourself and Mr. Depp.
It would.
And therefore?
And therefore I accept the instruction.
How frequently did you communicate with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because impossible to do so without disclosing attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you communicate with the press?
Same instruction not to answer on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
What were you hoping to gain?
Same instruction not to answer the question.
I accept the instruction.
You remain Mr. Depp's primary counsel for all of his affairs. Isn't that correct?
I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer that because I don't think you can answer that without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp, and we have to be consistent.
That's true, and I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 3. Did there come a time in 2018 that you contacted Rolling Stone about writing an article about Mr. Depp?
And to the extent that you cannot answer it without disclosing communications with Mr. Depp, I would instruct you not to answer.
I think it would implicate discussions with Mr. Depp, so I accept your instruction.
The author of this article, which was published on June 21, 2018, is Stephen Roderick. Were you present when Mr. Roderick interviewed Mr. Depp?
You may answer that question yes or no.
It's not yes or no. I was there for some of it.
Okay. Was the Rolling Stone interview before or after Mr. Depp filed suit against the Sun and Dan Wooten?
I'm not sure.
Do you recall whether the publication of this Rolling Stone article was before or after Mr. Depp filed the lawsuit against the Sun and Dan Wooten?
I don't.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at page 10. And it says on page 10, it was Adam Waldman who first contacted Rolling Stone about writing a story about the injustice of being injustice being done to Depp's reputation and bottom line. Do you see that? Well, before you go there, Mr. Waldman, I asked you a question. I just read that and said, do you see that? Can you answer that question?
I thought I answered yes, but yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. And is that an accurate statement?
No.
What is inaccurate about it?
It says it was Adam Waldman who first contacted Rolling Stone. That's incorrect.
What is correct?
What is correct is that I was not the first to contact Rolling Stone.
Who first contacted Rolling Stone?
Mr. Depp.
I'm going to ask the question, notwithstanding, why did Mr. Depp contact Rolling Stone?
I would instruct you not to answer that question.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp authorize you to have communications with the Rolling Stone to set up this interview?
Instruct you not to answer that question on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Did you assist Mr. Depp with publicity on Mr. Depp's behalf?
I would instruct you not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client communication.
I accept the instruction.
In your view, does assisting Mr. Depp with publicity constitute legal work?
The witness has already testified he had one engagement for Mr. Depp, and that was a legal engagement. So I'm going to instruct him not to answer any questions about his communications with Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
In participating in the interview with the Rolling Stones, were you speaking on Mr. Depp's behalf?
And I'm going to instruct not to answer because, again, I don't think you can answer that question without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp about authority. So I'm instructing you not to answer the question.
It was Mr. Depp's choice whether you said anything to the press relating to Mr. Depp. Would you agree?
I instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept
Mr. Waldman, you reached out to a number of other publications to speak on Mr. Depp's behalf. Do you recall?
Again, I would instruct not to answer to the extent it requires you to disclose communications that you had with Mr. Depp.
It would, and I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you communicate with on behalf of Mr. Depp?
Same instruction not to answer based on attorney-client privilege and attorney work product.
I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you reach out to on Mr. Depp's behalf relating to the UK litigation?
Same instruction not to answer on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you reach out to on Mr. Depp's behalf relating to this litigation?
Same instruction on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you reach out to concerning allegations that Mr. Depp had abused Amber Heard?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, you had a Twitter account, did you not?
I did.
When did you begin that Twitter account?
I'm not sure of the date.
Approximately when?
I'm not even sure of the year.
Was it prior to 2005, 2010, 2015?
Do you want me to speculate?
I want you to give me your best estimate.
Okay. I'm really not sure of the year. I couldn't put a specific date on it.
Do you recall?
If you want to give me ranges, I could try.
Do you recall how many years you had the Twitter account?
Not precisely, no.
Was it more than a year?
I think so.
Was it more than 3 years?
I don't think so.
Now, you had your Twitter account suspended, correct?
Yes, that's true. My Twitter account was suspended.
Do you recall when that was?
Not with specificity, no.
Do you recall why?
Well, wrote several letters to Twitter to ask why I was suspended for life from their platform. And the response that I received was multiple violations of their policy. So I asked, could they name one example of those multiple violations? And they responded by saying now they were appealing, without my asking them to do so, my suspension. And that's when they sent me another note that I was suspended for life.
So just so the record's clear, so you have been suspended for life by Twitter?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a Twitter account now?
No.
Do you still communicate with the press relating to Mr. Depp?
And I would instruct the witness not to answer the question to the extent that it requires you to disclose communications between you and Johnny.
It would, so I accept the instruction.
Do you still communicate with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Has Mr. Depp ever asked you not to speak to the press?
Same instruction, same grounds. That on its face, it would require Mr. Waldman to disclose his communications with Mr. Depp, which he will not do.
It would, and I accept the instruction.
Would you have followed Mr. Depp's direction if he had asked you not to speak to the press?
I will instruct the witness not to answer because it's an end around the attorney-client privilege. Clever, but I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
Has Mr. Depp ever asked you not to speak to the press about issues involving he and Amber Heard?
We'd instruct the witness not to answer the question on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Would you have followed Mr. Depp's direction if he had asked you not to speak with the press about issues involving he and Amber Heard?
And I will instruct not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Has Mr. Depp ever asked you to correct or retract any statements you made to the press relating to Mr. Depp or Mr. Heard or Amber Heard?
Would instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Would you have followed Mr. Depp's direction if he had asked you to correct or retract any statements you made to the press relating to Mr. Depp or Amber Heard?
Same instruction, same grounds.
And I accept the instruction.
Have you ever asked the press to correct or retract any statements you have made to the press relating to Mr. Depp or Amber Heard?
I want to make sure I understand the instruction. Are you saying you instruct not to answer in the event it implicates privileged conversations with Mr. Depp?
Yeah, I think I'm going to instruct not to answer.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 4. I think I'm going to try to blow it up just a touch. It looks kind of hard to read. Okay. And it's an article from July 3, 2020 from Mail Online. This is Daily Mail Online. Do you see that?
I do.
No, actually, if I'm just going to go to page 8, I'm going to ask you to take a look at the following. It says, Adam Waldman, Depp's lawyer, said afterwards, quote, Amber Heard and her friends in the media use fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and a shield, depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts, quote facts, end of quote, as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you make that statement?
I believe I did.
Did you make that statement on behalf of Mr. Depp?
Instruct the witness not to answer that question on attorney-client privilege grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you make the statement?
Same instruction, same rationale. You can't answer the why question without disclosing attorney-client privilege, so I would instruct you not to answer.
Were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made this statement?
And in any event, I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer that question on attorney-client privilege grounds.
I apologize. I actually didn't hear the question. I can agree with the instruction, but I probably should hear the question.
Fair enough.
Amy, could you read that back, please? Thank you.
One moment. Were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made this statement?
I would instruct the witness not to answer on attorney-client privilege grounds.
Thank you. I accept the instruction. Sorry for the repetition.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp before making the statement?
On the same grounds.
Yeah, I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss the statement with Mr. Depp after making the statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware, either before or after, that you were making this statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make this statement with Mr. Depp's authorization or agreement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware that you were speaking with the press?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp ever ask you to retract or correct this statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had asked you to retract or correct this statement, would you have retracted or corrected it?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had told you that the statement was not correct, would you have corrected or retracted it?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Did you rely upon any statements or evidence from Mr. Depp in making this statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
Yes, I accept the instruction.
And if you could bring up exhibit number 5. Mr. Waldman, I'm going to be asking you a question about a specific statement in this one. If you would like to read the article first, you are certainly at liberty to, and you could take control now and do that.
Thank you, I will.
It says, this is, I guess, I didn't set the stage here. This was the Daily Mail published on July 3rd, 2020. And I'm going to now direct your attention to page 9. Depp's lawyer, Adam Waldman, said the various discrepancies prove that nothing Heard and her friends said about the events of May 21, 2016 could be considered credible. Do you see that?
Hearsay.
Then I'm going to direct your attention, Mr. Waldman, to the next statement. Quote, quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempt didn't do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine and roughed the place up, got their story straight under the direction of a lawyer and a publicist, and then placed a second call to 911. Do you see that statement?
I do.
Did you make those statements?
There are two parts to what you've shown me. The first part didn't have quotation marks around it.
And I'm not asking about that. I'm sorry.
Where it said nothing could be considered credible, that's not quoting me. The part
Right.
with the quote marks, I believe I said that, yes.
So starting from quite simply through (911), you stated all that. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Did you make these statements on Mr. Depp's behalf?
Instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you make these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
What were you trying to convey to the press in making these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp before making these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss these statements with Mr. Depp following making these statements?
Same instruction, same rationale.
Yes, I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware either before or after that you were making these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make these statements with Mr. Depp's authorization or agreement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware you were speaking with the press?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp ever ask you to retract or correct these statements?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had asked you to retract or correct these statements, would you have retracted or corrected them?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had told you these statements were not correct, would you have corrected or retracted them?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you rely upon any statements or evidence from Mr. Depp in making these statements?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at exhibit number 6. This was another Daily Mail online, July 3, 2020. And if you would like to go ahead and read the article, this would be a good time to do it.
Thank you.
Mr. Waldman, we were looking at Waldman exhibit number 6, and it's the Daily Mail from July, just lost her there, but July 3rd, 2020, and you were going to scroll through it, and I think we had some technical difficulties, so we took a break. Have you had an opportunity to review it, or do you need to now?
No, Ms. Bredoff, I just saw the screen for the first time, so may I read it now?
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you to turn to what is the 11th page, the last page you just finished reading, and I'm going to direct your attention to some specific words that are attributed to you. Do you see that it says Depp's attorney Adam Waldman said? Okay. You see Depp's attorney Adam Waldman said. Do you see that there, Mr. Waldman?
I do.
Okay. And then I'm going to direct your attention to specifically the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you speak the words, quote, the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp?
I'm not sure. It appears as I look at this that there are quote marks around the statement, and that suggests that I did. I don't remember saying these particular words, but it appears so.
Do you have any reason to believe that you did not say the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Ms. Johnny Depp?
No, I have no reason to doubt that.
Were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made this statement? I'm going to refer to it as a statement. I'm taking specific words, Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp. But were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made the statement that included Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp?
Instruct the witness not to answer based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you make this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
What were you trying to convey to the press in making this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make the statement on Mr. Depp's behalf?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp before making the statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp following making the statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware either before or after that you were making this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make this statement with Mr. Depp's authorization or agreement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware you were speaking with the press?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp ever ask you to retract or correct this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had asked you to retract or correct this statement, would you have done so?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 11, and if you want to take a moment, I'm going to try to make it. Mr. Waldman, I'm just going to ask you, it's just kind of 2.5 pages. Go ahead and take the moment to review it, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I've read it.
Okay. So directing your attention to exhibit number 11. So, because there's a number of these, so maybe we can just clear it up right from the start. So we have conversation. If you look at the top, conversation. 6 messages, 3 parties, over 209 minutes. And it has this first one, it has a date and a time, and it has a telephone number. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And then it has some email messages, or text messages. It looks like it starts with Keith Bishop. Do you know who Keith Bishop is?
I do.
And who is he?
Keith Bishop is a publicist who lives in London.
And for what publication?
Oh no, he's a publicist. He's an advisor on media.
I see. Did you, at any time, did you or Mr. Depp ever employ Keith Bishop in any kind of public relations role?
Mr. Waldman, I would instruct you not to answer I would instruct you not to answer the question to the extent that it would require you to disclose any communications you had with Johnny, either receiving or giving.
I would not be able to answer without doing so, so I accept the instruction.
Okay, and then Mr. Bishop says, and this is on 1/28/2020, Adam, I can confirm a meeting with the Mail Online for Monday, 17 February at 10 a.m. You see that?
I do.
So did you, in fact, have a meeting with the Mail Online on 17 February?
I couldn't say sitting here now definitively that we met on Monday the 17th of February, no. But I see this and it wouldn't surprise me if we had.
And was Mr. Depp with you when you had the meeting?
I believe Mr. Depp was with me when we had this meeting.
And you were representing Mr. Depp at the time, correct?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
When did you obtain the audio tape that you're referencing in this text message?
And I would instruct you not to answer the question to the extent it would require you to disclose any communications you had with Mr. Depp, your client.
It would, and so I won't be able to answer the question.
What tape did you provide to the Mail Online, the Daily Mail?
In this, are you asking, forgive me, in this instance relating to this text?
Yes.
My recollection is that I gave a pair of audio tapes, actually, to them. Whether that occurred sequentially or at the same time, I don't remember, but I provided them 2 tapes.
What training have you had in domestic violence?
None.
Have you ever represented any clients who have either been accused of domestic violence or had domestic violence committed on them other than Mr. Depp?
No.
And of course, you never saw any, as we would say, element or elements of things that Ms. Heard claimed, right?
I never saw any element or elements of things she claimed. Do you mean, did I ever see evidence with my own eyes that something she was saying was false?
Yes.
Yes, to some extent I have seen evidence of things that show her statements to be false.
Before we get there, as best you can recall today, who are the eyewitnesses that you, among the 29 or so that you referred to in the text to Christian Carino, that you believe disprove Ms. Heard's claims of abuse by Johnny Depp?
Okay, good. It's also probably easier to answer by taking a particular incident rather than just thinking of names of people. So maybe this is a good illustration that is a helpful answer. On May 21st, 2016, and I always view this as one of her central claims. It was the one she put on the cover of People magazine. It's the one she led with when she went to get her temporary restraining order. The phone to the face incident on May 21st, 2016. That's her claim, and that she was further beaten by some appendage of Mr. Depp in the face, and her hair was pulled. And she showed up on the 27th in court with a lot of bruises on her face. So there are 2 police officers, one domestic violence trained female police officer, who've testified over and over and over that there was no damage to the penthouse, which Ms. Heard claimed was destroyed. That's a direct quote, destroyed. There are, that I can think of, 9 other witnesses, the majority of whom are either neutral or actually Ms. Heard's own witnesses, who have testified in various forums, various times, that there were no injuries to her face whatsoever between the 21st and the 27th, when suddenly there were bruises.
Who were those 9?
Let's see. Laura Divinier, Melanie Inglesi, Amber's own primary makeup artist. Laura Divinier was Ms. Heard's assistant and decorator, and now works for Elon Musk. Hilda Vargas, Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's at the time housekeeper. Samantha McMillan, who was Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp's stylist and good friend of Ms. Heard's. Isaac Baruch, Ms. Heard's and Mr. Depp's friend, close friend, and Ms. Heard's neighbor in the penthouses. Okay, so continuing on, the witnesses, a list of some witnesses to the 21st, her claims of violence and damage to the apartment. Trinity Esparza, who was the head of the concierge desk at the Eastern Columbia building, and a friend of Ms. Heard's also. Cornelius Harrell, who I think also worked for the concierge desk, or in any event worked for the Eastern Columbia building, and met with Ms. Heard on the 22nd of May, which meeting was captured on CCTV also. Alejandro Romero, who I believe is head of security at the Eastern Columbia building. And I think Brandon Patterson also testified about the absence of bruises. And I should even distinguish, because we're talking about the notion of a hoax, I should distinguish these people specifically have given testimony that Ms. Heard was uninjured between the 21st of May up into perhaps the 25th or 26th of May, and then of course she appeared bruised again on the 27th. Some of them have testified that even after the 27th they were with her and she appeared and that she appeared bruised. But during that period between the 21st and the 27th, I'm not sure if I've listed 9 plus the 2 police officers, but I think that's an illustration of what I was referring to when I in the question you asked me about.
Can you please pull up the document labeled ARW 660, please? Sorry, but you do believe that the pictures and videos Marilyn Manson sent you help disprove Ms. Heard's allegations, correct?
As to that incident, Thanksgiving, perhaps 2013, I think those videos and photographs, yes, demolished her claim.
Have you communicated with other social media users about this case other than public messaging platforms? Let me ask that differently. Have you communicated privately with other social media users about this case?
Other social media, I want to make sure I'm precise. Other social media users?
Yes.
That group would include almost everybody on Earth.
Have you provided information about this case to other social media personalities who then post that information?
I've provided information episodically to what I would call internet journalists, and I'll define that as journalists who are not affiliated with, you mentioned, I think, NBC a moment ago, or a mainstream media outlet.
Have you communicated with a social media user who goes by the name That Umbrella Guy?
I've had several phone calls with a person who goes by the name That Umbrella Guy. I don't actually know his real name.
Have you communicated with him other than through phone calls?
I don't remember doing so, no.
What are other, well, let me ask you this. Have you communicated in a similar fashion with someone on social media who goes by the name That Brian Fellow?
Yes.
What about someone who goes by the name The Real Laura B?
Yes.
And have you communicated to those individuals listed evidence that you believe suggests that Ms. Heard's allegations are hoaxes?
I would say I communicate with the internet journalists, because we put them in a category calling them that. I've done that. Exactly the same way I would communicate with mainstream media. If they have questions about evidence or the facts, I'll inform them.
And have you, when you communicate with them, do you do so? You testified some by phone, correct?
Yes.
Do you do so by text or messenger platform?
Largely, I think by phone, but if I communicated in writing, it would be probably by signal.
Can you please pull up the exhibits ALH 17001-2, please?
Showing on the screen, exhibit 24.
No, my first question is that in that box where it says first on the record statement from me regarding the body cam to RTL, Adam Waldman, Johnny Depp's attorney, is that a statement that you made to a German media outlet called RTL.
Yes.
And in that statement, you say that LAPD have now opened up a criminal investigation into perjury of Ms. Heard, correct?
Yes.
Did you make a correction to RTL when you learned that the LAPD wasn't in fact investigating Ms. Heard for perjury?
Well, the way you've characterized it is not exactly what I would agree with. The LAPD told me that they were investigating the perjury claim at that time. Then sequentially came the statement. Then came notification from the LAPD that it was actually the LA Sheriff's Department that was investigating it, and that was the last I heard about it.
And who notified you from the LAPD that it was allegedly the Sheriff's Department who was investigating it?
The same desk officer at Foothill. And when I say he's the desk officer, I don't know if that's not necessarily the job title.
How did you find his, do you have his contact information?
I don't think I do. I don't know, but I don't, well, I'm not sure.
And I'm sorry if I asked you this. How did you come into contact with this desk officer?
I brought a binder of information, including the statements that had been made and the evidence showing that those statements were false.
In your view? So you took a binder to the LAPD and spoke to this desk officer?
Correct.
And was that the only time that you spoke to this person?
The 2 times.
Were they both in person?
Oh, maybe it's 2 or 3 times. No, 2 times we're on the phone.
Was the first meeting in person when you brought this binder?
No, the first was on the telephone.
So the investigation was opened up at your request after you brought this binder to the desk officer? Is that right? I didn't ask
him to open an investigation. I filed a claim with the LAPD regarding these perjurious statements that Ms. Heard and her best friend Rocky Pennington had made to a court.
Was that claim that you filed in writing?
Yes.
Do you know whether that claim was produced as part of your document production in this case? Because I certainly haven't seen it.
I don't know that I ever received a copy of it. It was filed in writing with the LAPD. But I don't recall that I ever received a copy of it.
Did you draft it?
No.
So you were talking to the desk officer and he was taking down notes, and is that the writing you're referring to?
Yes.
Did you ever see this alleged written claim?
Yes.
Did you sign it?
I don't recall if I did.
Did you ever speak to anyone other than your client about this alleged perjury investigation, other than your client and the desk officer?
Oh. Well, I think this quote that you've shown me to the media would constitute speaking about it.
Did you ever hear anything more about this perjury investigation, to the extent it existed, from any other third party who claimed that they had spoken to anyone in LAPD or the LA Sheriff's Office?
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Waldman, do you have a professional license?
I do.
Do you have your own law firm?
I do.
What is the name of your law firm?
Endeavor Law Firm.
When was Endeavor Law Firm formed?
I think it was in 2005.
And who was it who formed your law firm?
It was I who did it.
And who owns your law firm?
I do.
What is your title at the Endeavor Law Firm?
Managing member. I believe.
And it's none of our business who your clients are, but does the Endeavor law firm have other clients other than Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Does Johnny Depp issue you a Form W-2?
I don't think so, no.
Do you receive legal training from Johnny Depp or any of your other clients?
I suppose the practice of law in general is legal training, but if I understand your question correctly, no.
Fair point. Have you ever listed Johnny Depp as your employer on any filings with the IRS?
No.
But you offer legal services to clients, correct?
Yes.
All right, I'll say, do you offer legal services to the general public?
Probably not to the general public, but I offer legal services. I think that's your question.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, our next one would be Detective Sandanaga, Sandanaga. It's about 20 minutes.
All right, let's go ahead and have that witness. And is that?
And
go ahead.
We start the questioning.
All right, thank you.
Get your name and business address for the record, please.
Marie Sandanaga, Marie, Sandanaga, Sadanaga. And my business address is 100 West 1st Street, Los Angeles, California.
And what is your current occupation?
I am a detective with the Los Angeles Police Department, and I am the department's domestic violence coordinator.
What does it mean to be the domestic violence coordinator for the department?
So I am recognized as the person most knowledgeable in domestic violence. I oversee how our department as a whole responds to domestic violence. So I don't investigate cases right now myself. I just make sure that officers and detectives are responding to domestic violence how California State Penal Code wants us to.
And how long have you been with the LAPD?
17 years.
What, if any, policies, procedures, and protocols are in place at the LAPD for domestic violence cases separate from other types?
So once we determine there is domestic violence, we have to determine whether there is a crime. Every time we respond to a domestic violence call, per state law, we need to document whether it's a crime or just an incident, which would be when there is not a crime, but there's still paperwork done. So that is part of the officer's investigation.
Now, I had asked a little earlier about when the victim is reluctant to press charges. If the patrol officers saw property damage or marks on the face of the victim, even if the victim was not cooperating and did not want to press charges, what would the patrol officers' obligations be back in May 2016 on a domestic violence call?
If officers determined that there was domestic violence, even if a victim is reluctant, our policy is they still make that arrest if a suspect is there or take a report.
So if there are, when the patrol officers arrive at the scene, and this is May 2016, and there are 4 people that are present at the scene, how many of those individuals are the patrol officers obligated to interview? So I'm going to show you the incident call here, and it goes down and it has domestic dispute, and then it says met with victim, looks like check location, verified husband left, victim advised verbal dispute and refused to give any further information, issued business card. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. In May of 2016, was the language victim advised verbal dispute language that patrol officers were trained to provide when they were not going to document anything from the scene?
It can vary, but officers would commonly use the phrase verbal dispute or to document when a report was not taken.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 8. It's dated November 24, 2014. And it's subject domestic violence supplemental report. And it says the domestic violence supplemental report form 15.40.02 has been revised to provide a more concise picture of the history and needs of the victim for the purpose of investigating the crime of domestic violence. Do you see that?
Yes.
What is your understanding of why the LAPD decided that they needed to create a supplemental report form that would give a more concise picture of the history and needs of the victim for the purpose of investigating the crime of domestic violence?
Right. The supplemental includes a lot of questions that are required by California state law. So we included that on it, and the original supplemental was actually created a lot earlier, I believe in 1999. This revision of it added some specific questions to help us look at, kind of to do a risk assessment. I'm not sure if the supplemental is attached to this form, but on the supplemental, there's a section where I believe there's like 7 yes or no questions. That is what was added during this revision.
Detective Sandanaga, I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 9. And do you recognize this supplemental report?
Yes.
Is this the supplemental form that was referred to in exhibit number 8?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we look at this, and we start out on the left-hand column, and it has a number of different observations to make of the victim. And it includes shaking, unresponsive, crying, scared, angry, fearful, calm, agitated, nervous, threatening, apologetic, under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of drugs, or other observations. And it says document in narrative. All right. Are these typically characteristics of victims of domestic violence?
Yes.
And I'm going to turn your direction to the crime scene now. And the same question, there's a number of different items on here, including location, vandalized, ransacked, and personal property damage, furniture disarray, broken. What is your understanding why these are included on this list?
My understanding is that these are things that are typically at a crime scene or can occur, so things that we want officers to look for and mark when they take the crime report.
And as with the questions I had on the characteristics that are on the list for the victims, are these items that are also discussed with the police officers in their training to look for in even making the determination whether a crime has taken place?
Yes, they are.
Is there a scenario under which the patrol officers decide that there's no crime, but they see property damage and injury and take photographs?
I mean, every situation is different. I believe one way, if we have a situation like that occurred, then there should be a domestic violence incident report. So there is a place to document your observations and statements from people and a reason to have those photographs.
even if ultimately the officers determined that it wasn't a crime.
And yes, that's why domestic violence incident reports are reports where there are no crime, and that is why we have them, so we can document and have a history of calls and see, in case there is another call in the future, that there is prior history of any type of domestic call, even if it was not ultimately ruled a crime.
Would that incident report include if there were interviews with witnesses and if there were any photographs or notes taken?
Yes, there is still a narrative that is written where everything, the officer's investigation and observations and any photographs are listed.
And was there an incident report in place in May of 2016 for patrol officers to use in domestic violence calls?
Yes.
Could you please describe the purpose of an incident report as of May 2016 and what was included typically in an incident report?
So the purpose of domestic violence incident reports were to record when officers responded to a call of domestic violence that did not result in a crime. They are actually required by state law for us to document every domestic violence incident that we respond to. And in that report, it's the same, I keep calling it a face sheet, that's not the official term, but the same as a crime report that we would take it on, but you fill out the information, you just do not list a suspect because we have no crime. It's the victim who was in fear that the other party may cause some type of danger to them, and that other party is then listed as a witness. And then there is a narrative that is included, the same type of narrative that would be in a crime report, where you would write down your source of activity. The officers would put their source of activity and then document their investigation. The statements that anyone made, as we ask on domestic violence calls, what type of relationship it is, how long they've been together, any prior incidents of domestic violence, all that would be included in the narrative of an incident report.
And would any photographs or other notes also be included in that incident report?
Yes, they can be, if there was anything that they saw that officers believe needed to be documented in there.
And where would an incident report, and I'm again back in May 2016, where would that be filed or stored once the patrol officers were done with their shift for the day?
The officers would turn in their reports, including any incident reports, to the watch commander, who would read over it and sign it off. And if it is approved, it would go to our records unit at that division to create a report number on it. And then it does get assigned to a detective, just so that we have it on file in case there's any future incidents.
Do officers at some point have to make a determination as to whether domestic violence has occurred?
Yes, they do.
Okay. What criteria do officers use to make that evaluation?
They use the interviews with the parties that are there, what they observe at the scene, even what they observe, like the demeanor of the victims and the suspects. Every situation is different, but it's really like taking in the whole 360 of where you are and what's occurred, so they can get all information to make that educated determination if a crime has occurred.
Can you just generally describe for me the circumstances under which a domestic incident report is used?
We take a incident report when we determine there is no crime, but that one of the parties is in fear that their life was in danger, or they could be a victim of some type of serious bodily injury. So the third incidents you would have, or where we don't take the incident report, is where both parties state it was an argument, there was no physical injury, both parties say we weren't afraid that the other was going to do any type of harm to me.
Okay. And so in that case, in that third case that you just described, would there be any documentation required typically?
On that third one, when we don't have the fear, so it makes it no incident report, it's only documented on that daily field activity report.
Ms. Meadowhoff asked a line of questions earlier on in the deposition about victims of domestic violence being reluctant to come forward and speak up. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is that a significant problem in dealing with domestic violence calls?
Yes.
Is that a problem that you have personally experienced on your own calls?
Yes.
Okay. When confronted with a person who's unwilling to make a statement, is there much that a police officer can really do if you have somebody who just refuses to make a statement and refuses to indicate that they have suffered violent abuse?
It's not too much. Usually we teach them to talk about the cycle of violence and power and control, and see if we can start a rapport with the victim and get them to discuss. But if they really don't want to tell us what happened, we can't force them.
If a potential victim has visible injuries, or that there are indications at the scene that there has been some sort of violent episode, does the fact that the potential victim declines to make a statement mean that the officers can't go forward?
No, not necessarily, because they would need to investigate more, but you do have the visible injury and evidence of some type of struggle, so they would need to try to get that probable cause to determine that it was a crime that created that injury.
There were a number of questions asked about if observed injury, if observed property damage, back and forth, and both of us have asked you a lot of questions about this. And so I just want to make sure that it's very clear. If a police officer responding to a domestic violence call sees injury, regardless of whether the victim cooperates, what is the police officer's obligation? This is as of May 2016.
To do an investigation to determine if that injury was a result of a crime.
And that investigation would include what?
It would include interviewing anyone that is at scene, seeing if there's any type of physical evidence of altercation, or depending on the story that was given, if there's corroboration of that, seeing if there's any witnesses. Kind of depends. Each one's different, but just doing a thorough investigation.
If one of the other witnesses took the officers through the entire premises and showed broken glass, spilled wine, and a number of areas of disturbance and vandalism, what would the officers' obligations be then?
The officers would still need to determine if there was enough evidence there from these witness statements and the things that they're seeing to determine if this injury is a result of a crime.
What discretion do the police officers have when they see an injury on the victim when they report it to a domestic violence call? And this is as of May 2016.
The officers still need to do an investigation if there is a visible injury, because they have to determine if it was a crime.
So one of your roles, if I understand it, is to make a determination of that the police, the LAPD as a whole, how you're overseeing how they respond to domestic violence calls, correct?
Leading.
Yes.
And let me ask it just a little bit differently. In making the determination of whether to create an incident report, what, if any, factors can the officer consider if the victim does not want to press charges, but the officer still believes that an incident report is appropriate under the circumstances?
It would, if an officer determines that there was not a crime, yet there was enough there, and guess what I'm trying to say? I mean, the purpose we have to think about, that we tell the officers the purpose of domestic violence incident report is for documentation of incidents, because we know with domestic violence there's usually a series of incidents that happen, and not all of those are crimes. So for us as officers, we document those, so in the future, if there is a crime, we can go back and say there have been all these other incidents. So as officers, we kind of take that into our analysis of the scene, and if we can't determine whether a crime has happened, we have to think about, do we need to document this so maybe sometime in the future people know that this happened.
All right, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our lunch break at this time. Again, do not do any outside research and do not discuss the case with anybody, okay? We'll see you back in an hour. All right, so we're back at 1:45. Is your next witness on a deposition, or? It's going to be live, all right, so we'll take care of the TV then. All right, we'll see you at 1:45.